Hello everyone, my name is Christian and welcome to my hobby blog. Today I'm very excited to go into day 2, or at least entry 2 of the 31 Days of Japanese Films. This was the movie I watched last night. I wrote down notes, went through the different special features that I was really interested in, and I'm very happy to say that today we are talking about 1952's film by Kenji Mizoguchi, one of the all-time great Japanese directors, and this is his work, The Life of Oharu. This is a very, very pathological film. It is very emotional. This is one of my favorite ones. This has always been one that I never strongly felt about, but it was with my last watch last night that I really understood how masterful this film was. And just to give a little bit of a story of what this movie is about, Oharu is a character who is married off by her father not married off, but is sent off to a prostitution house where she is working. And she is introduced to a new man who is a servant of a high-ranking lord, and she gets involved with him, and after that, she basically is stigmatized by her father's action of putting her into prostitution. And in this society, this is something especially tough for her to get out of because women had no rights back in these days. This was a very turbulent time for Japan, at least, in the Edo period, which is the 1603 to 1868. So about 200 years of really sort of awful conditions for women. And before I get too deep into all of that, which I have notes on, the rest of the movie is her just being sort of not passed around, but forced into positions that she does not want to become. So one part of the film is her having to be the birth mother, basically, for a lord because his wife is unable to carry children in terms of birthing. And so what happens is that she is just forced into all these different positions where she has no agency with what's going on with her life. And it is something absolutely tough to watch because there's so many points, at least for me, watching through modern eyes, my brain goes, man, I would have done this, I would have done this, I would have done this, but none of that would have worked for Oharu. There was absolutely no rights for the woman in this period, unless you were very high-ranking and rich. But this entire movie is very pathological, as I've said, and this is something that Kenji Mizoguchi is so good in, because he has done over 80 movies, 89 to be exact, and this info is from one of the video essays that is on the Criterion release for The Life of Oharu. And so this was his 80th movie out of 89, which is a lot, especially in those days, because he was a pretty prominent director before World War II. And as that was happening, or the Pacific War, as that was happening, he was able to do a lot of movies, but a lot of it was very censored by the film board. And this movie especially was put on the shelf for quite a number of years because it kept getting rejected by the film board because of the themes being studied and explored in this film of women's rights, women's agency in life, women's place in the household, and sort of critiquing all of that because Kenji Mizoguchi was somebody who was very concerned about the well-being of women. There's a part in the documentary where it says he was a sort of bit of a hustler and that he always had a woman by his side, was always drinking, so he definitely has some problematic aspects to him, and I think that is something that must be noted in regards to this movie, because although he is very sort of trying to think, he's very reflective on the human condition, and especially of the situations and just situations that women have to deal with from men. And he really capitalizes on that and explores that throughout this movie. And this is something he's done throughout all of his career, and I can't speak too much about it because I've only seen this one and maybe one other film by him. And just based off of this film, it is very evident that he would have handled this movie quite a bit differently, but if it had been approved originally. But I really enjoy the sort of view into this very specific woman's life and seeing it slowly fall, because she starts at the top. She is an assistant to a lord, or the wife of a lord, and from there she falls in love with the sort of the, I'm not sure, but I'll get more into that later, but I keep going off on rambles, so I apologize. But this is an adaptation of a famous novel called The Life of an Amorous Woman, which was written in 1686, the final year of the Edo period. And this was written by Oharu Saikaku, who was a pretty prominent poet, I believe. The video essay mentioned that he was the Japanese Shakespeare, basically, and that he just had so many works that were so influential to society and was just very well done writings that I don't have any experience with, so I'm taking the video essay at its face value. But this was rejected by the film board, and they shelved it for a few years because the final product is a lot less cynical and a lot more pathos-driven than what Kenji Mizoguchi wanted, because he does, at least the video essay says that he had a pretty cynical view of power, and that was something that I thought was very interesting during the essay. And talks about how his filmography really focuses on the suffering of women and the gender inequality during the feudal times and during the Edo period. So what I really like about this film comes down to one actress, and her name is Kinuyo Tanaka, and she plays Oharu. This is a very, very heavy lift of a movie for an actress to do, because she has to convey so many emotions without talking, because she is a woman. Women were talked to in this time, and they were not really permitted to speak. They were very isolated and just really cut off from everything. And so she just really knocks out the acting in this film. Her performances throughout all of the scenes are so good. I really love towards the end of the story where she is, and I won't spoil it, of course, I'm not going to do that, but there's a point where things sort of break for her, and she just unleashes her anger and just really tears into the person that she is being angry towards. And it's so well done. And this movie just really benefits from her performance, because she went full method acting into this role. And she basically prepared for the role by wearing period clothing for months at a time before they even began shooting. And she bathed at, this is what the video essay talks about, and I wasn't really sure what he meant by this, but she would go to museums where they would have old Edo period bathhouses, and she would take a bath there to sort of immerse herself into how she would convey the emotions and just be natural in that sort of environment. And the museums were fine with that and let her. But one part that was interesting is that Kenji Mizoguchi even asked the museums to let her wear the gowns and the robes that were in the museums being showcased in order for her to really get immersed into the roles. And I don't think the video essay says whether or not she was able to do that, but I find that really interesting that Kenji would ask the museum to do this, because that is something that not many directors want their actors really to do, want to spend the time doing. And this is how I think Kinuyo Tanaka just really knocks this role out of the park, because she carries so many scenes because it's focused on her character throughout the entire movie. It's called The Life of Oharu. And she really just... I had a thought and I went off, and I'm so sorry. So I basically just thought it was interesting that the director did that, because not many directors will have their actors go such a long length, and especially with authentic clothing from this period. So I thought that was really interesting, and I appreciate that he did that, because the actress Kinuyo Tanaka, she just really knocks it out of the park. And I think all of those experiences that the director let her do just really added to the I guess the immersion of the film, because she looks completely natural in this clothing. And right from the first scene, it's the latest part that we see of her until the very end of the film, where she is wandering a street and is recounting an experience, I apologize, she's not recounting an experience, but she meets a group of pilgrims. Oh my gosh, I apologize again. She is recounting an experience where a group of pilgrims say that she's too old, and that she should be the motivation for these pilgrims to stay celibate, because she's just so terrible and so old, and she's passing herself off as 20 years old, and he even says, "You don't look 20, you're too old." He's just really shitty, the head pilgrim guy, and he really just kind of lays into her, and she just has to sit there and take it, because there's a bunch of pilgrims around who are listening to him say this about her. And it's later in the film, and this is why I got a little bit confused, is that later in the film we do see this experience, and it's so much worse than how she describes it, because she finds a group of prostitutes as she's wandering the streets, and she joins them, and they all go to a campfire that a man under the I won't say a bridge, but it's under the walkway of a lord, and the lord comes out and it's like, oh, y'all aren't bothering anyone, just don't light anything on fire. And so they begin talking, and Oharu is recounting this experience with the pilgrims, and it's really interesting because one of the prostitutes asks her, like, oh, like, how did you even get to that situation? And she's probably expecting just a simple travel story of Oharu staying at this inn that the other pilgrims are at, but there's a whole lot more history going on in Oharu's life, and we get to see all of that, and that is what I really appreciate about this movie, because this movie is very emotional. It's very pathos-driven. A lot of his films are, and she just completely conveys that perfectly in every single film. She's just very emotive, very expressive. I really enjoy and value her performance. I think it's the thing that I enjoy most out of this movie. It's just watching her in the setting that she's in and whatever situation she's in, and seeing how she's going to get out of it and what happens, because anytime I rewatch this movie, it's after a couple years since the previous one. This is probably my fourth watch of this, maybe my third at most, or at the least. And every time that I rewatch this movie, I don't really remember what had happened. I have watched it before many times, and every time I'm like, I don't fully remember what happens. And so this watch last night, where I just had my phone in the other room, I had all the lights off, I was just sitting focused on this movie, it really opened my eyes to how just perfect this movie is. I always rated it very high. I never underappreciated it, but I guess I did underappreciate it, but I just really enjoy this film. And when the prostitutes ask her, like, oh, how did you end up in this situation? It cuts to black, or at least fades to black. And that's when the movie begins. And we go from her part of the royal court, where she meets this courtesan who is, I guess, an assistant to, or at least a protector of the Lord. And that courtesan is played by Toshiro Mifune, who, if you don't remember, he was one of the main witnesses to the trial in Rashomon, the previous film that I discussed on the series. And he's really the only one that seems to care about her. He doesn't take no for an answer, which I don't like, but he really sort of tries to be nice to her in the beginning of the film, and she's very just looking down on him. I'm better than you. You are just a simple courtesan. I'm the Lord's wife, I think she becomes to this Lord, or at least someone very important. And he writes her a poem. We don't actually see this poem, or we don't read it, but we start off this act of the film with him asking another Lord, like, hey, did she read my poem? Or did you read my poem? He's talking straight to her, I remember now. And she's just like, no, I did not. But in reality, she did. And he's really trying to get with her. And he knows that because he's so much lower than her and the caste system, that she there's no really hope of it, but might as well try, is sort of his attitude. And he is caught with her, and she just rats him out, and she is punished for it. Toshiro Mifune is executed, and she's sent off. She's just completely exiled from this township and from this town. But for the rest of the movie, nobody even treats her with any sort of compassion or kindness. And this is what I really enjoy about her performance, because every situation that she's in impacts the next situation that she's in. So in the beginning of the movie, you see her one way, and then you see her differently in the next scene, then the next scene, then the next scene, until the end of the movie, where you finally have the full picture of what her life is, the life of Oharu. And you sort of realize, oh shit, like, it's very complicated. Everything went to shit for her. This is really hard to sort of give any sort of judgment on. This was just a shitty situation and shitty life for her. And that's especially, that's really emphasized in a particular scene in this movie, where she moves and becomes sort of livestock for this lord, because his wife is unable to give birth. And so she is sitting in a line full of beautiful women, and this lord is just going up and down the line like, you have a big nose, you have a pimple, and it's just really, he's looking for the perfect woman, and so that the baby is as good looking as possible, because his wife is most likely somebody he chose also, and she had no agency in that either. And Oharu, since she can give birth, she is bought and placed into the Lord's castle, or the Lord's house, and is told to now get pregnant. The Lord will sleep with you, and you got to give birth to the baby, and then you're gone. And that's exactly what happens. And after she is given birth, the wife just comes in and just chops her hair off, because at an earlier point in the movie, Oharu was told not to point out that this woman is bald. She has lost all of her hair. And Oharu makes fun of her for that to her face, because I'm not really sure why, but she does this. And so the woman just sort of stews about it for however long, and I guess around 10 months, for, I guess 9 months for a baby to get born. And the wife just cuts her hair off, Oharu's hair, which is long and flowy and beautiful and well taken care of. And the wife cuts it off, just makes it look like shit, just awful. And it's very frayed, it's just awful, and it doesn't even show you the full hair cutting. It just shows you her starting it and wrestling with Oharu, and finally getting the knife and just cutting off tufts and throwing it to the ground, and it fades to black while she continues to do this. And Oharu just never gets a better opportunity in her life. She just never has an opportunity to escape. She just has no agency in her life. She's a total slave to whatever society wants her to do, whether to be a baby birther and a she just has no agency. It's really unfortunate, and this is why the movie is so effective, because not only is the writing very pathological, as I've said numerous times, it's also paired up with very great acting by everybody involved, Toshiro Mifune, and especially Kinuyo Tanaka. I want to make sure that's really her name. Yes, it is. And in the final act of the movie, after her hair's been sheared off with, I assume, a rusty knife, just something that the Lord's wife was able to find. In the final act of the movie, she is exiled, as they told her she would be. And she goes home and finds that her son is now involved with the royal court and is now ruling. And so she comes in, she's like, hey, that's my son. I gave birth to him. And and all the gods are just like, no, I'm not going to let you do that. And they block her and only let her see the back of his head while he walks away. And the end of the movie, I will not discuss, but the last 30 minutes of this one is just so hard-hitting. Everything comes together so well, and her performance is just perfect. I have no higher praise for her than that her skill is perfect. So, I actually wrote a line here to end off on that. The life of Oharu is full of pain and loneliness, among many other negatives, and that only scratches the surface of what her life is. I'm hiccuping now, I apologize. So, there's really nothing that I dislike about this one. The only thing that I would, I guess, warn people about is that this is a very methodical movie. It moves at a snail's pace in terms of action and just energy levels. It's a very, I don't want to say a flat line, because the emotions are up and down, where you have your rising action and your climax, and then we slow down a little bit and enjoy, something a lot less tense and a lot less chaotic, or just all that. And this movie is just absolutely well done. I love it. This watch really sort of made me see the light to sort of give a reaction to what this watch felt like for me. But the impact of this movie is that it was nominated for a Golden Lion. Rashomon won one. This one was nominated. And it won Best Award, or Best Film, from the Venice International Film Festival, which is a pretty fucking big deal. And it also won Best Score for that film, which I didn't really talk about at all. The score for this one is so well done. I don't know really anything about music or musicology, so I cannot really say much about it. The music comes in really well when it needs to. It is subtle when it needs to. It accentuates emotions when it needs to. The music is very good, and I can't articulate more than that because I'm not much of a music person. But thank you all so much for watching, and I really enjoy this movie. If there's anything else you want to know about this movie, please comment below. I will be ready to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you all, everybody, for watching, and please have a great rest of the day.